Hello everyone and welcome to this session. My name is Eliraz Levi and I am a security researcher and hunters. In this session, we are going to talk about correlation of events as part of threat hunting for business email compromise scenario on Microsoft 365. Microsoft 365, previously known as Office 365, is one of the most popular SaaS platforms for enterprises worldwide. It includes several well-known SaaS applications: Exchange Online, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, and dozens more. Business email compromise attack is considered to be the main threat in 365 environment. According to the FBI report, the annual financial loss due to BEC attacks is almost $3 billion, more than $7 million per day. And these are only the cases reported to the FBI in the US. The actual number worldwide is probably significantly higher. Having said that, it is not a surprise that more than 60% of organizations rank BEC attacks as one of their top 5 security concerns. So how did $3 billion disappear last year? Let's see a short example on how such attacks evolve. We start with a threat actor that gains access to developer mailbox as a result of a phishing or by using credentials that were leaked via some third party. In general, developer mailbox can be interesting, but here the focus of the attack is on financial fraud. So the attacker keeps looking for more interesting victims. He leveraged the developer mailbox to conduct internal phishing over to the CFO's personal assistant. The PA has delegation permission over the CFO mailbox, so at this point, the attacker has the access he wants and he starts to explore the CFO mailbox. He focuses on his email correspondence with the bookkeeper and in general, how the money flows within the organizations, payment for subcontractors, and more. In addition, the attacker can now exfiltrate sensitive information like financial documents from OneDrive and modify other settings that will allow him to intercept smoothly to the correspondence between the CFO and the bookkeeper. He can use forwarding rules, inbox rule on mailbox folders, and other techniques. Now, the attacker intercepts the email correspondence between the CFO and the bookkeeper. He creates fraudulent emails that convince the bookkeeper to switch bank account details of specific subcontractor and transfer the payment to a bank account owned by the attacker instead of the legitimate bank account of the subcontractor. The attacker verifies every email comes from the bookkeeper would be forwarded to a side mailbox folder, like RSS, for example. Then the attacker will be able to examine this email first, and only then will be forwarded, if any, to the inbox folder. That way, the attacker verifies the real CFO won't be aware someone is creating fake requests by his name. Finally, the attacker achieving his goal and the payment is forwarded to a bank account owned by the attacker. How can we hunt for such scenario? We can divide the scenario into 2 main phases. First is the initial access, the phase in which an attacker gains user credentials. For this phase, we can try different hunting analyses. We can try to look for brute force attempts, MFA fatigue, anomalous logon attempts, and also impossible travel events. The required data sources for such hunting are Azure sign-in logs and logs within the Azure Active Directory workload, now known as Microsoft Entra ID, under the Unified Audit Log. The next phase is post-compromise. Here we would like to hunt for activities conducted by the attacker on the victim mailbox, OneDrive, as well as other 365 services. For this phase, we can try different hunting analyses, like abusing of e-discovery, creating inbox rule, transport rule, forwarding rules, disruption of audit logs, etc. The required data sources for such hunting are different workloads under Unified Audit Log, OneDrive, Exchange, as well as Security Compliance Center in order to identify abusing of the e-discovery service. Bottom line, there are many hunting analyses we can execute here, but they spread across various workloads and operations that have different schemas. So our next question is how to correlate between these different events. There are several key fields to look at. Every field has its own pros and cons. For example, the first field is user. It exists across all operations, but the disadvantage is how to differentiate between activities of the legitimate user and the threat actor. Another field is IP. It exists across most operations but changes frequently. Another is the session ID. It exists across most operations. It's unique, but every time the threat actor will generate a logon event, the session ID may change. And correlation ID, also unique, but does not exist for most operations. In addition to these key fields, there are supporting fields. In other words, fields that are not readable enough, but can assist us when combining them with the main fields we outlined on the left side. For example, unique token ID that is unique but does not exist for most operations, and app ID and user agent fields that exist for most operations but not unique at all. So we talk about the different data types we need to work with, as well as the correlation fields. The following table summarizes how each correlation field exists for each schema, if any. We can see that in some cases, the field name is different, and for some cases, there is no field name at all. For example, most operations under Security Compliance Center, where e-discovery can be executed, don't include IP, session IDs, and the only way to correlate there is using the user ID. Another interesting issue is when we want to correlate between Azure sign-ins and user login operations. The Azure sign-ins includes correlation ID, which is different from the session ID existing user logged in. So how can we correlate between them? We can use the field inter-systems ID that exists as part of the user logged in and equals to the correlation ID. We can summarize by saying that best practice is, if applicable, to try and correlate based on two fields out of the main fields we mentioned. For example, user and IP or user and session ID. And anyway, we should be aware of the pros and cons of each field we want to use for correlation. There is much more to talk about threat hunting for BEC in general and specifically about events correlation. We want to use this opportunity to invite you to a webinar we plan to have next month, where we will delve into more of these topics, including logging, detection engineering, challenges and opportunities, and also aspects around investigation of such alerts. Hope you enjoyed this session and thank you for your time.